if we could take pictures this good of extrasolar planets, then my job would be really easy. But the problem is that these extrasolar planets orbit around other stars. That's what the extrasolar in extrasolar planet means. And these other stars are pretty far away. So if you think that Mars is far away, the very nearest of these planets are a few light years away. And a lot of the ones I'm going to talk about today are tens of light years away. All right, so even if you're going really, really fast, it would be hard to get to these planets anytime soon. Now, if we had an image this good of a planet, we could see stuff like clouds and continents and oceans on it. And we might actually be able to learn something about how these planets work and how our planet works. Right? We could learn how climate works by studying other examples instead of limiting ourselves just to the Earth. All right? And so the way this sort of exploration always works is you go out and you explore these other worlds, and in the end you end up learning an awful lot about our world here that we live on. So the workhorse for the last decade or so has been this instrument here. This is the Spitzer Space Telescope, which NASA launched about a decade ago. And this is a mission that's orbiting around the sun, and it can see thermal radiation. So it can see the heat coming off of planets orbiting nearby stars. All right, so if you point the Spitzer Space Telescope at a nearby planet that you know has a nearby star that you know has a planet, then what you might hope to see is something like this cartoon here. Okay, but that would require an enormous telescope. Okay, instead, all that you can actually track is just the brightness of that star and planet over time. All right, and you'll find that it gets dimmer if you're lucky and the planet passes right behind the star for a brief moment. Right, that little dip there is called an eclipse, and the depth of that eclipse is actually telling you how bright the day side of the planet is. Okay, and this is thermal radiation, so that's actually telling you how hot that planet is. Right, so this is nice. You can learn something about the day side of the planet, but you can actually do better than that. Okay, if you study the shape of that eclipse in gory detail and you do some math, you can actually get kind of a scan across the day side of the planet when the planet glides behind its star, and then a couple hours later when it's revealed on the other side. Okay, and so you can combine that information to actually make a 2D temperature map of the day side of a planet. All right? Now, if you care about the night side of the planet, you have to be more patient. So here you have to observe it for an entire orbit. So you're basically observing this planet for one of its years. All right? And as it orbits around its star, at some points in the orbit, you're seeing the night side, which is cold, and therefore the system looks less bright. And then half an orbit later, you're seeing the day side of the planet, which is hotter and therefore brighter. And so by studying the way the brightness of the planet is changing, and again, you do some math, you have to do math here, you can actually make a map, a longitudinal map along the equator of the planet, figure out which longitudes on the planet are hotter. Okay? So by combining this two-dimensional map of the day side of the planet with this one-dimensional map of the entire thing, you can actually make a very low-res temperature map of a planet. Okay, this is nothing to write home about except that this planet is 60 light years away. And so we can actually figure out which parts of this planet are hottest. So for example, if you look at that little dot, that black dot in the middle, the star, this planet's star is directly above that little black dot. But if you look carefully, you'll see that the brightest part of this, the whitest part on that map, is not actually right at that dot. It's actually a little bit east of that dot. Okay, and that's actually telling us that there are winds blowing on this planet. Okay, so we can actually learn about winds on a planet that's 60 light years away. And we can do better than that. We can also learn about the way this atmosphere absorbs infrared radiation. So we can learn about the greenhouse gases in this planet's atmosphere. Okay, we can actually figure out how much water vapor, carbon dioxide it has. We can actually figure out where the clouds are on this planet, how cloudy it is. All right? Now, clouds are very important. And to understand just how critical clouds are to our future, I have to teach you a little bit about global warming, which hopefully you've all heard about. So what I'm showing here, the horizontal axis is showing you the amount of carbon dioxide in an atmosphere, okay, going from pre-industrial levels all the way up to twice pre-industrial level. Okay, so jacking up the amount of carbon dioxide. And then the vertical axis is telling you the surface temperature on the planet. So if you watch a lot of Fox News, you might believe that dashed line is the correct answer, but it's been known for quite a while, actually for well over 100 years, that if you account for the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, well, the surface temperature must go up, okay, because carbon dioxide is a very effective greenhouse gas. But it doesn't end there, because now you have this planet that's a little bit warmer, and as a result, you have more water vapor in the atmosphere. And water vapor is itself a very effective greenhouse gas. And so the net effect is more than doubling the amount of heat. So now we're getting up to about 2 degrees Celsius change in temperature for doubling the amount of carbon dioxide. But it doesn't end there either, because you also have to account for what happens to the ice and the snow at the poles of the planet, which melt on a warmer planet. And because they're melting, they make the planet less shiny, less reflective, so the planet absorbs more heat, that makes it yet hotter. All right, and so you can account for that as well. And the amazing thing is, this was all figured out over 100 years ago. Okay, the Swedish physicist Arrhenius predicted this quantitatively over 1 century ago. Okay, and so this is common knowledge. This is a great prediction by a great physicist, and people know this, and maybe this is why you chose to take the L to work today. Now, the big unknown is clouds. Okay, clouds change the final answer by as much as a factor of 2, and we just don't understand cloud formation well enough to tell you what the forecast is. All right, so we'd like to test our models of cloud formation. So how can we do that? Well, on Earth, you could do something like fly a special airplane through a cloud on purpose with special equipment on it and actually observe how aerosols in our atmosphere are helping to seed cloud formation. Okay, so this is the sort of thing that hard-nosed atmospheric scientists, say at Colorado State University, would do. Okay, so they would fly through clouds. Sounds kind of crazy. Okay, but this is the scalpel approach, right, where you're studying in gruesome little detail what's going on Earth. But there's an alternative, which I'd like to propose, which I call the crowbar, which is you don't get the little details, you look at the big picture. Okay, and so we can go out and observe other planets that are pretty much like Earth in some cases, and maybe there's something a little bit different. Maybe you look at a planet that's a little bit bigger, or a planet that's rotating a little bit faster or slower than Earth. And then you look at that planet and you say, do my models properly tell us where the clouds ought to be on this planet? So to give you an example, here is the prediction for where clouds should be on a planet that rotates really, really slowly. All right, so because the planet rotates really slowly, there's a point indicated by the black dot there that is always directly beneath its star. All right, and so what you get at that sub-solar location is you get a lot of upwelling, lots of moist kind of updraft, and this is actually very similar to what we get in the tropics on Earth, right, the tropical rainforest. And so you end up getting a whole bunch of clouds right there on the day side. That little triangle that's white are clouds. Now, unfortunately, there's no telescope that we currently have access to that can detect this, even for a very nearby planet. All right, but that's going to change. It's going to change in this decade. In 2018, NASA is going to launch the James Webb Space Telescope. So this is like that other telescope I showed you, Spitzer, but on steroids. In fact, this telescope is so big, it can't even quite fit into a rocket unless you fold it up. So it folds itself up, it goes into a rocket ship, you launch it into space, and then once it's orbiting the sun, it unfurls. Okay, so it's rocket science meets origami. And this telescope is actually going to be powerful enough to detect light coming from nearby rocky planets that are a lot like Earth. All right, it's going to see the thermal radiation. It's going to see the heat coming off those planets. So it's going to look at one of those planets, and it might see something like this. So this is that same planet that's rotating really slowly. And remember, we made a prediction of where the clouds ought to be. And so if you looked at the temperature map of that planet, it should look something like this, where you have the night side is cool, because it has pretty much a permanent night side, because the sun never shines there. And then on the day side, there's also a little cold triangle there. And that cold triangle is because of the clouds. Okay, because if you look at Earth from far away, the cloudy places look really cold, because you're seeing a cloud deck that's at high altitude. So it's cold the same reason that the summit of Mount Everest is cold. All right, so this is a clear prediction of what we should see when we look at these nearby rocky planets that are rotating really slowly. And if we don't see this, that means that this particular model of cloud formation is wrong, and we have to fix it. And that's important for helping us predict the way our climate is going to go in the future. Now, looking further ahead, if you go 10, 20 years in the future, what we'd really like to do is launch something like this. So this is obviously an artist's impression, which gives you an idea of how far in the future this is. But this is showing you a star shade, which is basically like a space parasol that you launch. It's this big thing. It's got a beautiful shape, and it blocks out the light of a nearby star. And if you do that, if you carefully block out the light of a nearby star, like I can do here so I can actually see some of you, then you can actually see the dim points of light that are orbiting around that star. Okay, so you can actually see reflected light coming from those planets. Now, if you had all the money in the world, you could build a telescope the size of Earth, and then you would see something like this. You could actually see the planet rotating around, and this is in 4 different colors. right? But that's not what we're going to get realistically in my lifetime. And so what we're going to get is more just the brightness of the planet over time and how it wiggles up and down. And what you should notice is that the shapes of each of these in these 4 different filters is a little bit different. And that's because it's telling us something really important about what's going on the surface of the planet. So in particular, even if all you had was this, you just have these light curves, which is basically just the brightness of a planet over time in a bunch of different filters, you can actually try and reconstruct something like this. So the way this works is first you can figure out how many surfaces there are on the planet. And you can actually figure that out just by looking at those different colors and doing a little bit of math. So you're looking at this pale blue dot, right? Carl Sagan's pale blue dot, and you're just observing how its colors change with time. You can figure out there's 3 colors, there's 3 different surfaces on this planet. Okay, and you can figure out what the colors of those surfaces are. So you can figure out that one of the things is grayish, those are the clouds, there's reddish stuff, which is land, and there's really dark blue stuff, those are the oceans, that's water. And you can even map out where they are on the planet. Okay, so you can figure out where they are, and if you observe the planet for an entire year, you could actually do better than this map. You could actually make a 2-dimensional map, so you could figure out where the continents are located on this planet. So we're definitely not going to get images this good of exoplanets, but nonetheless, we're going to get, really rough, low-resolution pictures of these planets that are actually going to be good enough to tell us something about how clouds form, how winds develop on planets, maybe learning about continents, plate tectonics, a lot of these really hard problems in planetary science that we just haven't been able to figure out by studying just our planet. All right, so this is the equivalent of being a medical doctor and then realizing at some point mid-career that there are other species other than humans. And you're like, wow, well maybe I could advance a bit more in my understanding of biology if I could study something other than just this one example I've been given up to now. And so that's where planetary science is going. Our understanding of our planet is going to be completely revolutionized because we're going to have all these other examples that we can observe in the next decade or 2. Thank you.